Hey, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be covering today working with conventional survey data. So this is specifically working with some total station survey data, covering a little bit of terrain modeling and breaklines. I'm Erin, and with me today is Matt. He's making his Soft3 webinar debut. So for those of you who plan to ask questions, let's be nice at the end. A quick, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First of all, of course, you are muted as always, but please, use that question panel in your GoToWebinar pane to ask us questions and to engage with us. We'll likely be answering most of the questions at the end of the presentation. So yeah, think about them. You can type them in there and we'll cover them off at the end. And secondly, like all of our webinars, it is being recorded. It's going to be available afterwards on our YouTube page, and you'll receive an email link to the recording sometime in the next day or so. So here's a little bit about what we are going to be talking about today. Oops, let's get all these up here. Okay, so we're going to be starting off with the import of total station survey data, and this includes setting up a reusable import spec that we can take and use on other comparable files, creating breaklines, finding breakline errors, how we can fix breaklines when they're crossing and why that's important, as well as adding a georeferenced image. So Matt's going to be demoing today in Terrain Tools. This is also known as the Terrain module of Roadeng. So yeah, that's it. So really quick intro for me, and I'm going to pass it over here to Matt.
All right. Everyone see that? Good. All right. Excellent. So I've got an example here. Actually, I've got two examples that I'm going to go through fairly quickly this morning. So let's see. We've got our total station webinar. The example I'm going to start with is this Hart Road TXT file. As you can see, it's a pretty typical survey file. We've got our coordinates, X, Y, Z, the point code that the surveyor has put in there, and the point number, so the sequence that it's been surveyed. Close out of that. Don't need to see that anymore. So I'm in our terrain module. This is version 9. Very similar to version 8 for the most part, and I will mention whenever I'm dealing with a feature that's explicit to version 9. So I'm in here. I'm going to hit that icon up top and open. Total station webinar. So it's referencing terrain file formats. Click this. We have a big drop down of different import options. You can add to this list. This isn't everything. I'll go over that briefly. So if we want to add to that, cancel out of there, setup, module setup, and import. Then if we want to add something, we can add something that's entirely new. We're dealing with an unusual file type that we didn't have offhand. Do that in there. If someone else has an import setup already made, we can merge it into our default. And so, for example, if I wanted to add this total station IOP file into our options, hit merge, and it'll come into that large list. And then if you have something set up that you want to share with a coworker, you can hit save as. That IOP file will be saved in your program's data folder, and you can email that or share it on a server with them. All right. So instead of going file open, I will go file insert to get to the data. All right, Hart Road. I've set up this import format beforehand. Go over what's in there. So the structure, this is pretty important. We've got a TXT file. The attributes in it are comma separated. So choose between a few different options there, but tab or comma works for us for this. Skip characters, this isn't applicable for my example. It's just a legacy from what I used to set this up. If our TXT file has headers, we can skip those headers so you're not reading in something that says northing or elevation, etc. The column assignments, the order was point number, then northing, so that's our second column, easting's our third column, and then elevation's our fourth column. Next, we have our code. So as our surveyors out there with this total station or even an RTK unit, he can type in what he's collecting, and if that's standardized throughout the survey, it makes our lives a lot easier to compile the data. So we're going to assign the point code as that option there. We're also going to go with comment. It's going to be based on the point code, and our point number is going to be populated based off the first column. Another feature I'll touch on is an advanced features button. We've got this terminate character. So if the surveyor is collecting multiple linear features and he doesn't separate, or he or she doesn't separate it as, example, top of bank 1, top of bank 2 for separate features, if he or she puts a exclamation point or another predefined character in there to end the feature on the last point of that feature, the software will separate that. All right. So let's just check. We'll go over to the test tab to make sure that things are being brought in correctly and everything makes sense. So we've got X, Y, Z. Those look like X, Y, Z coordinates to me. Our code, PP, powerful, spot, everything's making sense. We'll check another attribute. Let's go point number. So on the third one, and it's third. That looks good. Now we'll go to the code. So this is very useful if you are doing surveys that are similar to one another and you want to streamline your process. So off the start, we've got this default point code. So that is anything that isn't in this list here is going to be brought in as a default. So we're going to set it as point connected. That's not really applicable for these smaller data sets, but we're going to leave that as yes. Skip, no, we don't want to eliminate it from the data set. Displayed, we want to see it. 3D, yes, there's a Z elevation or Z coordinate. And include in model, absolutely. We're going to go with a large icon so it's really obvious to see when we have something that we didn't account for in this list. Spot, the attributes here are going to be the same for us. We're just going to change the symbol to something a little more discrete, because generally your spot or ground or topo points are more just to create the right shape with your topographic surface. You don't need to really draw a lot of attention to them. The control file, so this could be your benchmark, survey control. We've got it in as control, so if the point code is control and then we have this asterisk, that's a wildcard character, it will read separate features in with the same setup. So if we have control 1, control 2, control 500, they'll all be brought in as separate points, but they will be given the same attributes. All right, let's look at a linear option, or a line option. So here's the break line. Same thing. If we have break line 1, break line 2, there's an asterisk to separate those and account for that. The type is in there as a polyline. Connect to all, so that's going to connect the dots sequentially. And for the points, break line option was grayed out. You can choose to have it as a break line or choose not to have it as a break line. We want our break lines to be break lines, and I'll describe in a little bit more detail once we have the surface built, what that does for you. All right, so I think we're good to go there. Let's on to the other tabs. This selection, this isn't really applicable for your typical total station survey data. It's if we want to exclude data to manage our file size or thin data to manage our file size. It's very useful for LiDAR data, but not within the scope of what we're dealing with today. Projection. The survey data is in UTM zone 11 for this one. Just set that. It's not defined when it comes in, but once we have it, it will be defined. Rotation. Our survey data is where it is. We don't want to move it around to fit another data set or anything like that. So we're going to leave that as disabled. let's hit OK and see what happens. That's incoming coordinate systems and units are undefined. OK to continue with conversion. Yes, so like I said, they weren't defined. They will be once they're in there. That's our survey. Right? And just without really looking at it in any detail, we don't see any lines going all over the place connecting things that shouldn't be connected. So it looks, at a glance, pretty good. Now, first off, we notice these big black blobs. And that's our default points that we didn't have any attributes assigned for other than a black dot. So that's in there as a gate. That one's in there as a oops. That one's in there as gate. We can change the symbols. We can choose whether we include that in the model. I assume the surveyor shot these at the base of the gate, so we can include that in the model. For these purposes, we can just leave that as is. Another example, we've got a power pole, PP, junction box, and power pole. So full name is showing there. And yeah, we can change those, the symbols, by Control L will bring up the symbol options. We can right click to bring up modify selected feature and line type symbols, or we can address it over here on the right. So let's change that one to just a different color for an example. Oops. We're good to go. All right. So before we get going too far, let's just check this to see how it looks without making any changes. We're going to set our contour interval at 5 for our majors. We're going to turn off labeling, and our minor contours we'll set at 1. Let's see what happens. So we've got a crossing break line error coming up right off the hop. We'll address that shortly. Too long. Okay, so we have this mess of contours here. We either have a elevation or point elevations either really high or really low. Address that, and everything else looks fairly good at a glance, but let's bring in the 3D view too. Look at this. Yeah, so our point is very low for that one. Over here. So when I mentioned the break lines before, a break line will force the tins, the triangles to build the topo surface to follow the line work for that feature. So here we have a ditch that doesn't appear to be modeled as a break line. Let's address that very quickly. So we will right-click, select feature by name. Let's see what's going on with our ditch features. So I typed D to jump to D's in the list. Shift, and we'll select them that way. We can also hit this Advanced tab. I'll select that. Hit Advanced, and if I type DITC and that same wildcard, the asterisks, let's see if we can select them. There, 2 ways to do it. Both are pretty quick. Okay, so this is all the ditch features selected, and the break line is not turned on with those. Let's turn that on and hit apply. Great. Go back to our plan view. And let's remodel that and see if we get everything right. So actually, I don't think that. Select features by name. Ditch. Select. Control E is going to bring up our attributes as well. That's not hit the right button. Okay, break line will turn the checkbox on. Okay. So calculate triangles, that's turned on. Everything else is the same as the first time we did it. Let's model that. Still have the crossing break lines. Did we address our issue? We did, so we don't have weird triangles coming across our ditch anymore. All right, now let's move on to the next item at hand. So this is a issue with our centerline points by the looks of things. It appears to be on fairly flat stretch of road on a tangent. Let's just bring up the feature coordinates and see what's going on here. So I can bring up the feature coordinates by modified selected features, coordinates. I can also hit Control-R to get there. All right, so if we go through this list, there's one of these things that's not like the other. Our elevation is set at 0 for that one. Let's, I don't think there's a need to move it around or send another surveyor out there to verify what it should be. I think the best bet for this is to delete it. Okay. You don't have to regenerate every time you make an edit. I'm just regenerating the tin to check to make sure things are working. So we zoom out. You don't have a big hole in the middle of a road anymore. All right, now we're going to address the crossing break line issue. So crossing break lines can be an issue. It makes inconsistent triangles and things might not model the way you'd like. So to do that, find those features quickly rather than scouring this for anywhere that things cross. We can go select features by property, and the filled-in box indicates it's an either or. If we click that, that would select everything that's not a crossing break line. We want to select the crossing break lines. Hit OK, and we have 2 features selected. If we hit this feature icon down here, it'll populate that and show us where those are. So this, we'll zoom in. It appears we've got a toe slope that's crossing a ditch line. Let's just move that over. So what I did, I right-click, edit, insert points with mouse, click that. So we're moving a point that the surface has used to build, so it will have to be rebuilt afterwards. That's fine. And we'll just move it to the end. We'll snap to the other point. Of course, this is to the designer, or people familiar with the data, to decide what is the appropriate method. If you're dealing with something really critical and you weren't confident of what you should do there, you might have to go back out to verify which point should be changed. We've got this feature crosses our road edge. So we've got a driveway that comes onto the road. I think the best thing to do here is we've got surveyed points here, there. Let's just break that. So we hit Control Q. You can also right-click to break a feature at your selected point. I'm going to delete it. All right, let's regenerate that. Let's see what we're dealing with. Perfect, no crossing break line errors. Everything looks pretty good. Cool. So now I'm going to jump into a quick version 9 feature. It's often very useful to have some kind of a background image for an ortho. So let's see what's available here. Click the import. Oh. Let's save what we've done first. So file, save as, desktop webinar, arch, oops, road, save. And in order for that import feature to zoom to an appropriate area, we're going to select a feature first. There we go. There's our selected feature. Doesn't line up perfectly, but background for that is I just moved this into place by hand rather than changing the projection. All right, so we're going to use Google image, or we can check to see what Bing has. Similar, different time of year, I guess. Still looks pretty good though. And yeah, there's also MapTiller, which is more for DEM data. So let's save the Google image file save as. We can turn this up for zoom to get the most out of our available information and hit save. I already have something in there, but I'm just going to save over it. Do you want to replace it? Yes. All right, so when we bring it in, it's going in the same directory as the file I just saved. It's also why I backed up and saved it, so I didn't have to navigate through. And when you bring it in, oftentimes this will be scaled back to reduce the file size. For this, it's a fairly small area. We'll crank it all the way up to full resolution. And it's coming from lat long and into the projection that we're working on. Apply transformation. There it is. Excellent. So let's get rid of that. Let's just start with an entirely new new survey to show that that does work on other data sets as well. So we'll go File, let's go Open this time. Total Station Webinar. I'm going to use the same import format as the last one. And let's use this Total Station example too. Do you wish to save changes? Okay. So it's using the same format before, all our structures set the same way. Codes, it's populating the same codes. Test, we can check to see what's going on here. So with this one, right off the bat, I notice our X and Y are right around 500. So we're probably dealing with a local coordinate system, and it doesn't make any sense to assign a projection. Selection, we're not going to thin. Projection, as stated, we're not going to change that. So let's just hit OK and see what happens. All right, I'm going to model that. Crossing break lines. Okay, so this looks to me to be possibly a site survey for a bridge. Look at it in the 3D view. Okay, so right now, looks like our center line is surveyed, and it's assigned as a break line. It doesn't look like there's any existing road, so it's likely a proposed alignment that's been picked up by the surveyors. Let's select that center line feature, and turn the break line off. All right. Okay, so that looks a lot more realistic. Oh, actually. That's it. It's a lot more realistic. Is there any issues? Let's go back to here. We've got some weird triangles going on here. Yeah, so let's think this toe probably makes sense to move that over. It's just been these spot or ground points should have been included in that toe break line. All right, excellent. And just really quickly, file, let's insert that in again. Everything's the same, so if we don't have something that should be in there, got rid of the PW. All right. So our PW is coming up as the default. I'm going to turn that Centerline breakline off that we just fixed. So we can address that a couple ways. We can right-click, select features by name, PW, select all of them. And then if I hit join, so Control-J or right-click to modify features, it's going to draw a zigzag through all that. So that's not very useful. Let's Control-Z, or we can also undo it, or we can explode that feature I just made. So modify, break, oops, all points, explode. All right. So it looks like the best way to deal with this is to go through and select all the features on one side. Control-J to join them. Set that as a break line. Excellent. We'll also change that to a color that makes a bit more sense for water. Turn that off. Okay, and that's a common problem to have if you survey and you don't have a unique identifier for each line, and you don't separate it with a defining feature, the exclamation mark. It's fairly easy to deal with in the software, and we can go select by name now and grab all our PWs, select, and then I'm just going to hold shift, deselect the one we already changed, and Control-J works for that one. I'll update the break line with Control-E to bring up that feature properties window, and Control-L to bring up my line type. And let's generate. And yeah, because I got rid of it and re-brought it in, this isn't fixed anymore. We can pretty easily go back and fix that. All right, open to questions.
Awesome. Well, everyone, hey, thanks to Matt for doing his first webinar. We're going to leave that question pane open here to field a few questions before we sign off. So, Matt, looks like you've got a couple there to answer.
All right. Just a sec. All right, so how easy is it to input without defined point codes? So let's just show a quick example of that. Insert file, it's the same one, and Hart Road flawed. So as long as your surveyor has collected some kind of identifier, you're good to go. But if you don't have your input format set up, it's really not a big deal. So I'll just remove all those predefined examples in this, or templates in this one, and everything's going to come in as a default. If you were starting from scratch and you wanted to build an input format, you hit load, and it's going to populate all the unique identifiers there. And you go through and you can assign all your different attributes to each individual type. But just for the purpose of this, let's leave it in as default and go from there. So everything comes in as a default feature, but what's really nice is that select feature by name. And okay, so we've got a break line. Select the 3 break line points. There they are. Let's hit join. We can change the attributes in here, so that's a break line. What else can we do? Select feature by name. Let's do the spot ones. Control rather than shift. Spot, select, and those are displayed, connected, elevations are assigned, and they're in the model. That's correct, but I don't want them to be shown that way. And let's change them to across. We'll change the symbol for this as well too. So we'll just go through and address them one at a time, and you can just eliminate all your default icons as you go through it. Yeah, so won't continue doing that just for let's get the gist of it. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go back to...
So just to clarify for everyone on the line, that last question that we just got in here was, how can I share my import spec?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I just assumed everyone could see those questions. So sharing the import spec, I will go to setup, module setup, import. So this is the one that I'm working in. If I want to save it, I'll hit save as. This is the directory it's going to. This program data file is often hidden. So copy and paste that over somewhere so you can navigate to it, but call it whatever you'd like. Total station example. Hit save, and you can go into Windows Explorer and send the link if you're working on a network, or if it's saved on the network, that was saved on my local, or you can just copy the file and send it in an email. That brings up the point that it's going to come into that. By default, it's going to navigate to the program data folder. You can put it back in there if you want easy access to it, or you can navigate to it before you start your project.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to transition now, just to saying, thank you to Matt. This was his first webinar, and I think he did a pretty darn good, awesome job. So well done, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for coming to today's webinar. For the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, we'll follow up with those folks after the fact over email. But yeah, thanks, everyone, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again at another upcoming webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.